By the mid-1970s, Toho had shelved Godzilla completely. Terror of Mechagodzilla bombed, and the studio spent the next few years chasing a Japanese Star Wars ripoff, with little to show for it. Going into the 80s, producer Tomoyuki Tanaka never stopped pushing for a revival, though. He saw Alien and Superman hit big, and he wanted to bring Godzilla back as a serious, high-budget film that spoke to Cold War fears. Through the late 70s and early 80s, project after project fizzled out. Scripts were too expensive, Toho was still wary from their kaiju debts, and ambitious pitches like the 1980 Bakan project got scrapped. But by 1983, Toho was desperate. Their holiday releases tanked. Nostalgia for tokusatsu was slowly coming back, and a Godzilla Revival Festival had sold out. Toho finally formed the Godzilla Resurrection Committee, with Tanaka and exec Mitsuo Horiuchi in charge. They fast-tracked a new film for the end of 1984, and in June, the revival was official, titled The Return of Godzilla. Tanaka wanted Ishiro Honda back in the director's chair, but Honda refused. Honestly, that was the right call. You see, Honda was working with director Akira Kurosawa on the Shakespearean samurai masterpiece that is Ran. I want to cover that movie on my channel so bad because it is so fucking good. However, despite the fact that he was already occupied with helping Kurosawa, Ishiro Honda was openly unhappy with how Godzilla had been handled in the 1970s. So much so, he actually retired from filmmaking altogether after making Terror of Mechagodzilla in 1975. It wasn't until 4 years later when Kurosawa persuaded Honda to return to filmmaking. So, it was pretty clear that the last thing Ishiro Honda ever wanted to do was make another Godzilla movie, which is completely understandable considering the work that he was doing with Kurosawa. Seriously, that run is just incredible. So, Tomoyuki Tanaka turned to a younger filmmaker, Koji Hashimoto, who had worked as Honda's assistant director. Under Hashimoto, the film was shaped into a direct sequel to the 1954 original, wiping away all the campy sequels. For Tanaka, this was personal. Colleagues described the film as his passion project, something that he poured his entire soul into. He even took a story credit because many of the ideas came directly from him during script meetings with screenwriter Shuichi Nagahara. At this point in time in Japanese and world history, the Cold War was in full swing, and Tanaka insisted it had to be a part of the story. Godzilla triggering a nuclear standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union was exactly the kind of tension that he wanted to put on screen. But Hashimoto and Nagahara pushed back, saying it didn't suit a Godzilla movie, but Tanaka forced it through. In his mind, Godzilla came from the bomb and had to stay tied to nuclear terror. Public fear of nukes in Japan had died down by the 1980s. Atomic energy was being promoted as peaceful use, but Tanaka just didn't care. That's why there's a scene of Godzilla tearing into a nuclear power plant and feeding on its reactor. It kept the allegory alive. At the same time, the filmmakers downplayed Godzilla's origin in dialogue and leaned into portraying him as more of an unstoppable animal. He's neither a savior nor a villain here. He's a natural disaster given form. Toho gave the film a hefty budget, about 1.7 billion yen, or about $6 to $7 million. This made it one of the most expensive Japanese productions at the time. They wanted this to feel like an event movie, and they brought back some of the old guard to make it happen. Effects director Teruyushi Nakano, a protege of Eiji Tsuburaya, returned one last time. He wanted to push the effects forward and give Godzilla a sense of power that the 70s films had lost. Hedorah and Gigan suit actor Kenpachiro Satsuma returned as Godzilla and was told to base his movements on no theater, sliding his feet with deliberate control. Nakano compared it to Michael Jackson's Moonwalk, where it's smooth, precise, and elegant. It gave Godzilla a slow, heavy presence that felt far removed from the clumsy stumbling of earlier entries. No disrespect towards Haru Nakajima, of course. The suit itself was brutal, unsurprisingly. It was built over a metal frame and layers of latex and rubber, which made it incredibly heavy and suffocating. Satsuma had played monsters before, but this one was especially punishing. It wasn't even tailored to his body, which meant he was constantly fighting against the frame. He lost a ton of weight during filming from heat exhaustion and oxygen loss. The production even had to rework the suit mid-shoot when Nakano realized it couldn't crouch down to grab a bullet train. The crew panicked, Nakano reportedly threw the script in frustration, and eventually they cut the suit to allow a little more flexibility. Looking back, one of the effects technicians joked that they should have just had Godzilla kick the train, which honestly would have ruled. On top of that, Toho built a giant animatronic upper body called the Cybot. It was 22 feet tall. It cost nearly $500,000 to make, and was meant to give Godzilla realistic close-ups with moving eyes and snarling lips. But the Cybot barely worked. It was clumsy and limited, so Nakano only used it for a few shots, like Godzilla's reveal at the power plant. The rest of the time, it was back to Satsuma in the suit. Still, Toho milked that robot for publicity, touring it across Japan as a marketing stunt. A life-sized Godzilla foot that was built for stomping cars and tanks was far more effective on film, but the Cybot was the one that got all the press. The Return of Godzilla opened on December 15th, 1984, marking the franchise's 30th anniversary. It sold 3.2 million tickets and made around $14 million in Japan. It wasn't a Hollywood-sized hit, but for Toho, it was a comeback. Critics praised the darker tone and the anti-nuclear edge, and it even won the Japan Academy Award for special effects. Some viewers thought that the Cold War politics dragged, others thought the human drama was slow, but none of that mattered because Godzilla was back. The movie set the tone for what became a new era for the King of the Monsters, with bigger budgets, continuity-driven stories, and a Godzilla that once again carried menace and scale. This is The Return of Godzilla. A volcanic eruption awakens a new Godzilla, who soon attacks a nuclear plant, feeding on its energy. Reporter Goro Maki discovers the creature's return after surviving an attack by a giant sea lice dubbed Shakirus. As Godzilla heads towards Tokyo, Japan deploys the Super X, a high-flying fortress, to stop him. A Soviet satellite mistakenly launches a nuclear missile, but it's intercepted midair, and its detonation revives Godzilla, who destroys the Super X in a brutal rampage. Scientists end up using a bird-mimicking signal to lure Godzilla to Mount Mihara. There, Godzilla is trapped in a controlled volcanic eruption, sealing him beneath the earth, at least for now. Right off the bat, the Return of Godzilla immediately feels apocalyptic. The opening credits inside a volcano set the stage with a hellish tone, and the music reinforces the sense that Toho was serious about taking the series back to darker territory. This is a horror movie first and foremost. The film constantly pushes that angle, and it works because the commitment is obvious in scene after scene. The introduction of Goro Maki as he goes onto the wrecked ship is the best example. The neon purples and greens and teals give the setting a John Carpenter vibe that feels ripped straight out of the 80s. You could even say it has a giallo horror vibe as well, with it feeling somewhat like 1971's The Case of the Scorpion's Tail. When Maki finds the bodies of the crew, the camera lingers long enough to make it disturbing. The corpses are grotesque, and the franchise hadn't really shown anything that graphic before. That willingness to lean into horror makes the opening hit harder than most of the previous films combined. But Shakirus kills the momentum of the sequence. The idea of a parasitic sea lice living off Godzilla and scavenging from shipwrecks is awesome. It's the kind of monster concept that could have been folded into the series in interesting ways. But the way it's handled here is so clumsy. Shots of it crawling on the floor are really good, but the effect of it dropping from the ceiling on visible wires destroys the tension. The creature comes off as being a relic from a cheap B-movie by Ed Wood than a serious threat for a 1980s horror movie. It's just so frustrating because the setup of the scene is really strong, but the execution is undercut by one bad effect that pulls the audience out of the atmosphere that was established for the past 10 minutes. But the movie does get back on track once Godzilla finally appears. His return is incredible. The simple setup of a ship in a storm at night is all you need. It nails the mood, and it works because the movie acknowledges the events of 1954 rather than just pretending like they never happened. This isn't a reboot or a retelling, it's a continuation, and that choice really gives Godzilla's return some presence. The film still spends time with characters just standing in rooms, talking through exposition, and those stretches can drag. There are moments where the dialogue feels like it's just filling space rather than pushing the story forward. There are moments where the dialogue feels like it's just filling space as opposed to telling a story and pushing said story forward. Even so, the choice to keep the continuity intact from this being a direct sequel adds to the sense of history surrounding Godzilla's reappearance. The human cast really keeps the story grounded. Performances are strong across the board with nobody feeling out of place. Ken Tanaka as Goro Maki stands out to me as being the best here. This would be his only appearance in a Godzilla film, and he makes the most of it. Maki's urgency drives the story forward, and his need for answers lines up with the audience's own curiosity. You want to see it just as much as he does. Tanaka gives the character enough presence to make him feel memorable, and that helps carry the film even through its heavier, more sluggish dialogue sections. The consistency of the cast as a whole supports the darker tone and makes this one of the strongest human ensembles in the series, even if the writing isn't really all there. What I really like about The Return of Godzilla is how much it feels like the 1980s. The movie is full of details that pin it down to that exact era, which, I get it, no shit, it was released in 1984, but the clothes, the cars, the architecture, the bulky computers, it's a perfect screenshot of Japan at that point in time, I would assume. Some people might look back at that and call it dated, but I think it's the opposite. It feels authentic, and in 2025, it lines up with the obsession people already have for that 1980s Japanese aesthetic. I'm honestly surprised it hasn't been mined for vaporwave edits or turned into TikTok clips, because even outside of the monster story, it looks incredible. The shot of Goro Maki standing against the skyscrapers at night is one of those moments that feels like it could hang on a wall as a photograph. This is a movie that looks good on its own terms. The production also feels larger than what the series had been doing. This looks and moves and feels like a real blockbuster, and that comes down to how much was invested into it. You can see it in the effects, in the city sets, and how polished the human storyline is. The director clearly had a plan for how he wanted the movie to look and how he wanted the characters to function inside of it. The human drama works here. It's not really just padding in between monster fights anymore. The scenes actually work because they feed into the larger story and they stay engaged without relying on Godzilla to hold interest. Now, the Cold War subplot weirdly holds everything together while also breaking the movie apart in a lot of ways. Godzilla surfacing in the middle of the nuclear standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union feels like the exact story a film from 1984 should be telling. The fear of nuclear annihilation defined that era, and the way Godzilla stirs up tensions between both sides makes complete sense. When submarines go missing, the Americans blame the Soviets, and the Soviets blame the Americans, all while Godzilla is the real cause. That misdirection is perfect, and it pushes the world closer to war and makes Godzilla feel even more destructive. He isn't only wrecking ships and cities, he's inflaming a global conflict that already had the entire planet on edge. The perspective is what makes it more compelling, though. Most Cold War stories that I'm familiar with come from either an American angle or a Soviet angle, but this one comes from Japan, a country that wasn't really involved, at least they weren't the two big sides. The government in the film isn't really trying to plan a strategy to win a war, they're just trying to stop two superpowers from dragging the world into one. That feels true to Japan's position at the time. They had already lived through nuclear devastation, and the idea of being hit again was a real fear. The story captures that mindset. It's about a country stuck between forces that it can't control, working desperately to avoid becoming the victim of another strike. Godzilla mirrors that situation. He towers over Japan in the same way that the superpowers do. Maybe not their skyscrapers, but figuratively. His actions are unstoppable, and the people on the ground have no influence over what he chooses to do. In this movie, he represents both the United States and the Soviet Union as a destructive force that overshadows everything and decides the fate of those unfortunate enough to be caught beneath him. The parallel makes the story feel tragic. Japan is caught between giants, both political and literal, and survival depends on decisions made far beyond their reach. When Godzilla finally arrives in the story, the payoff works exceptionally well. The miniature work in this film is stunning. As much as I enjoy Terror of Mechagodzilla, this feels like a massive leap forward in what tokusatsu and Suitmation could accomplish. The detail in the models are just incredible, and the scale feels so convincing. I love how small Godzilla looks when framed against the skyscrapers. That sense of proportion communicates how much Japan has changed since 1954, just 30 years ago. The nation had grown into a technological powerhouse, and Godzilla now looked like an intruder in a modern city rather than a beast crushing a port town. Keeping most of his appearances at night makes him even more frightening. The shadows, the glowing eyes, and the way he looms over people in the darkness give the film a genuine horror edge. But the suit design is where opinions are split among both hardcore Godzilla fans and general audiences. This version of Godzilla has been mocked plenty, and that criticism is somewhat fair. I think the problem mainly comes from the Cybot, the giant animatronic used for close-ups. The eyes don't really line up, and in too many shots he looks cross-eyed or unfocused, and those moments undercut the menace that the filmmakers were going for. Still, I think the overall design works really well. The fangs are a great addition, and the body shape feels like a natural evolution of the 1954 look. It's sharper and more refined without losing the rough prehistoric feel of the original. Derpy close-ups aside, this is one of the stronger versions of Godzilla in terms of appearance alone. Personally, I love the design. That's just me. I know that a lot of people hate it. I'm somewhere in the middle on it. I think it's really good, but those close-ups just kill it every time. Instead, the bigger problem I have with this movie is its pacing. The film feels like it wants to be two different stories at the same time, likely because the writer and director wanted to just follow Goro Maki, while Tomoyuki Tanaka wanted a Cold War political thriller. And that is what one of these movies feels like. One half of this movie is a Cold War political thriller about the US and the Soviet Union being pushed closer to nuclear war. The other is a character-driven narrative centered on Goro Maki and the Japanese government. Both stories are compelling, and both are executed well enough, but they compete for space. The result is a film that sometimes spins its wheels. Too many scenes repeat the same rhythm of officials debating Godzilla's threat, while tensions between the superpowers climb step by step. The escalation is there, but it doesn't always feel like the story is moving forward. Ultimately, I kind of wish that I got more of the Goro Maki and more of the political stuff in a movie where there's too much of it, if that makes sense. It's like, give me more, but also give me less. Give me more substance and less padding. Despite those issues, the movie has a lot going for it. Like, I don't outright hate this in any way. The acting is very strong, the cinematography is beautiful, and much of the writing holds up. It's a film that proves Godzilla could still be terrifying, while showing how much the series has matured technically since the Showa era. It's not just spectacle without substance. The flaws don't undo that achievement. It's rough at points, but the Return of Godzilla set the tone for a new era and showed that the franchise could be more than spectacle. It could be a serious piece of filmmaking that reflected its time, delivered horror, and re-established Godzilla as a force to be feared. At least, that was the case in Japan. I just spilt water all over me, and I hope it's not visible on camera. That sucks. Shortly after the film's release in the East, Toho wanted to make their money back fast, so they pushed hard to sell The Return of Godzilla overseas. In the US, the rights went to New World Pictures, which was Roger Corman's low-budget studio at the time. Instead of just dubbing the film and releasing it as is, they decided to Americanize it, the same way that the 1954 original had been turned into Godzilla King of the Monsters. Almost 30 years later, history repeated itself and the movie was recut, spliced with new footage, and dumped into American theaters in 1985, under the new title, Godzilla 1985. What audiences got was a very different film in both tone and content. New World brought in producer Tony Randall and director R.J. Kaiser to handle the changes, and they shot about 10 to 15 minutes of new material in the US. The most famous decision was bringing back Raymond Burr as reporter Steve Martin, the same role he had played in the 1956 re-edit. Burr, now older and heavier, was hired for just 2 days of work. He mostly stands in a Pentagon war room, staring at monitors of Godzilla and delivering grim lines about nuclear war. It's really cool seeing Burr in a Godzilla movie again, even if they just refer to him as Mr. Martin because of the actor Steve Martin, but it's ultimately ruined by the other American actors in these scenes. They just can't stop cracking corny one-liners, and the tonal clash with the deadly serious Japanese footage is immediate and distracting. The edits didn't stop there, though. New World's team cut down a lot of dialogue and political material to streamline the movie, and to make it a little bit less pro-Soviet, if you could even say that. Editor Michael Spence later admitted the marching orders were to make the film less about nuclear commentary and more about action for teenage audiences. Whole scenes of debate were trimmed or removed, and the pacing was altered to make the movie feel more like a standard monster spectacle. The most damaging change came in how the Soviets were depicted. In Toho's cut, a Soviet commander aboard a freighter tries to stop a missile launch after Godzilla attacks Tokyo. He fails, dies, and the missile fires by accident. In Godzilla 1985, the scene was altered so it looks like the commander deliberately launches the nuke before dying. A new insert shot of a finger pressing the button was filmed and added in. This change of having it be more deliberate and aggressive rewrote the Soviet character as a villain and cast the Americans as the saviors, since the US is the one that intercepts the missile. It was propaganda, plain and simple, and it stripped away the nuance of the original. Fans have never forgiven it. I mean, obviously, I'm an American, so it's kind of like, hoorah, these colors don't run, fuck the Soviets, but also it's like, you're impeding on the original creative vision of the original film. I don't like that. But also, hoorah. And then there's the Dr. Pepper product placement, which I thought about, by the way, taking all my figures down and putting Dr. Pepper up, but that's too much work for one bit. Fuck you. This product placement in the film has become infamous in its own right. New World struck a deal with the soda company, which already had a promotional partnership with Toho in Japan. Pentagon scenes were staged to feature Dr. Pepper vending machines, and one officer even swigs from a can during a briefing. The soda deal came with a $10 million marketing campaign, complete with ads and merchandise, but the blatant commercialism stuck out like a sore thumb. The movie is remembered less for its message than for its soda machine in the war room. Despite all the changes, Godzilla 1985 flopped. It opened in August 1985 on just 235 screens and pulled in about 4.1 million. The movie quickly vanished and critics tore it apart. Roger Ebert gave it 1 star and said the American editions ruined what had been a somber, interesting film. I think he was right. The Japanese cut had problems of its own, but it at least carried a serious tone. The US version buried that under clumsy edits, bad comedy, and soda product placements. As messy as this version of the movie is, it's still really fun going back now and then and revisiting both Godzilla King of the Monsters and Godzilla 1985 as a double feature of sorts. Raymond Burr does the best with what he's given in both cases, and I just appreciate the ever-living hell out of it. Still, I will say that my preferred version of the film is, unsurprisingly, the Japanese one. Pacing problems aside, it's a very well-made movie that has a lot to say about a country that was overlooked during the Cold War, and it features some phenomenal practical effects. This film marks the beginning of a new era, and we're just getting started. With all of that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick. You're watching Firewood Media. This is part 18 of my massive Godzilla retrospective project where I revisit and review every single Godzilla movie and TV show. The retrospective series is officially back, and I'll be posting entries more frequently from here on out. The next installment, Godzilla vs. Biollante, will be dropping in November. In the meantime, October on this channel is packed. I'll be releasing big retrospective reviews on Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and Halloween. And on the 31st, I'll be premiering my brand new short film. Now, I've been receiving some frequently asked questions about the channel, and I figure now would be a good time to go over that. In case you're new to the channel, I've been posting infrequently these retrospectives on the Gamera franchise, going movie by movie. The plan is to finish that series up in November. Some people assumed that I was dropping the series altogether since I went an entire month without posting any entries in that, but I assure you that it is going to get finished eventually. People have also asked me when this Godzilla retrospective series is supposed to wrap up. I mean, I have around 15 more movies to talk about, as well as the Hanna-Barbera series, the Godzilla the series. I want to also do a video about Godzilla commercials and other weird shows from Japan that never really got a release here. It's a lot, but the goal is to be up to date by the release of Godzilla X Kong Supernova in 2027. Meaning, I'm hoping to have said everything I want to say about the franchise before that movie drops. I'll review it, and then compile all these videos together into one massive supercut, and that will be the end of the series. Whenever a new movie or TV show in the Godzilla series comes out after that point, I'll just make a dedicated video for that new project and throw it in the playlist. There's no point in making a new multi-hour-long supercut of the entire series every time some new project drops. I also want to try and cover the entire Ultraman franchise throughout 2026, with it starting in January and ending in December. If you have any questions about the upload schedule or any of that tedious stuff, comment below and I'll do my best to reply. I know that most content creators on YouTube aren't really that open about their upload schedules like I am. I guess for me it's just something I really care about, and I like to kind of keep people in the loop. Also, one last little thing. I'm not going to be streaming as much since my weekday schedule is a lot busier with work, so all I'm going to say is don't expect consistent streams anymore, but I'll do my best to stream maybe once a month. Anyways, huge thank you to our channel members. You guys are the reason that videos like these can get made. Your names are listed right here or right here, wherever I end up putting it. For $1.99 a month, you could have gotten early access to this video, or maybe you remember and you're watching it now before it comes out. I don't know. You also get access to our members-only podcast. Right now, we should have 2 episodes out on the channel, so go and check that out. Become a member. It's totally worth it. I'll probably post clips as YouTube shorts, so if you're curious to see what that's like, check out the shorts, become a member, watch the podcast. If you like hearing my voice and, hearing me talk about stuff, then that's your best way to go about it. Thanks for sticking with me for all this time, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.